Hey friends, what's up? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Yud Gimel, Daf 13 of Masechta Beitzah. We oy vavoy. Daf 13 is basically a continuation of where we left off yesterday with different types of truma for grains, and we're going to talk legumes and things like that. So let's just kind of jump in. We're 6-7 lines into the page on Daf Yud Gimel. Amar Abai says Abai machlokas. So the machlokas between Rebbe and Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda, where Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda basically says that there's no truma essentially, when it comes to these stalks of grain, whereas Rebbe says, well, if you brought them in with your intention to rub them together and eat the berries, then you would separate truma from them. So Amar Abai machlokas b'shibolin, that's specifically by stalks of grain. Aval b'kitnius, but by legumes, they v'hakol isuryasa tavla, that once already they are bundled together, these legumes become tevel, and they're going to be chayev in meiser from the time that they are bundled together. Let's say that this supports that notion. Mishayilo chavile tilson shel tevel, somebody who has bundles of fenugreek of tevel, harez a kotesh, so you can crush them, umechashev, and kind of extract the seeds, and then consider kamazer yesh boim, how much seeds there are, umafresh ala zera, and then you separate truma based on the seeds, but don't worry, ve'eno mafresh ala eitz, and don't worry about the stalks. So we see that this Beitzah says, or Mishnah says, Mishaylo chavile tilson shel tevel. So we're saying that these bundles of fenugreek are already considered tevel, which means tevel obviously implies that you have to separate trumas from them. So we see that the fenugreeks that are bundled are chayev in trumas and maestros. My love, Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda. So let's say that this is even even according to Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda, who says that these bundles of wheat you would not have to separate truma from, but when it comes to these legumes, you would have to separate trumas from them. The Amar Hasam lo tavla hocha tavla, that even though by the bundles of grain he says it's not tevel and you wouldn't have to separate truma, but over here by the bundles of fenugreek of legumes, you would have to separate truma. Okay? Lo Rebbe, we say no, it's actually Rebbe who says that you have to separate truma from the fenugreek, from the bundles of fenugreek. If Rebbe, my irya tilson, hafili shibolin nami. But if it's Rebbe, then what's so special about fenugreek? I mean, even we said that just regular stalks of wheat, you would have to separate truma from them if you wanted to rub them together and eat them. Ella, my Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, so then are we going to say that it's Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda l'shma'in and shamin ekidnis? Well, then what's special about fenugreek? Why not teach about other types of legumes? V'chol shekain tilson, and then certainly that would include fenugreek as well. Ella tilson. It's trichale. No, there's a chiddush over here regarding fenugreek. What's special about fenugreek? Sakadaiti chamina. I may have thought to say, well, specifically when it comes to fenugreek, I may have thought to say that since the seeds and the stalk taste like fenugreek, it all just tastes like fenugreek. So, am I even saying that right? Fenugreek sounds. Fenugreek. Fenugreek. Alright. So when it comes to fenugreek, since the stalk and the fruit, the seeds, taste the same, so I may have thought they also have to take trumas from the stalk, so kamash milan that you only have to separate it from the seeds, but it's not necessarily any kind of a proof for Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda or anything like that. Ikadamri, those who say, Amar Abai says, Abai machlokas b'shibolin, that the machlokas that we saw earlier between Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, and Rebbe is by these stalks of grain, of wheat, aval b'kitnius, but when it comes to legumes, the bihakol isuryasa lo tavla. everyone would agree that bundling together these stalks, it would not be tevel, it would not be chayev in trumas. Meisved, we have a kasha, mishaylu chavile tilson shel tevel. What about the fact that we had this Bryce that says that if somebody has bundles of fenugreek of tevel, which means that obviously they're chayev in trumas, so areza kotesh umechashev kamazer yesh boin. So you crush them up and separate the seeds, and then you figure out how much trumas and maisus you have to take from the seeds, and you separate from the seeds, you don't have to separate from the stalks. So we see that these bundles of fenugreek are tevel, are chayev in trumas. So how could Abaye say that everyone agrees that bundles of fenugreek are potter from trumas? So my love, tevel tavel shel truma. Now when it says tevel, doesn't it mean tevel of truma? So therefore it's chayev in truma? Lo, tevel tavel shel trumas meiser. No, it means trumas meiser. Let's go weiter for a second. Uchdrababo amr Reb Shimon ben Lakish, Damar Babo amr Reb Shimon ben Lakish, meiser rishon sheikdimo b'shibolin. That says Reb Babo in the name of Reb Shimon ben Lakish that when you have meiser rishon sheikdimo b'shibolin, that generally what happens when it comes to stalks of wheat is that you have the stalks, but they're not yet chayev in trumas and meisus until you thresh them and put them in a pile and you flatten out the top. That's called meiruach. At that point they become chayev now in trumas and meisus. Now, if the Levi goes ahead and chapsarain and he takes 10% of the stalks when they're still in the stalks, and now he has meiser. Now, generally speaking, and we know already from the 7th parak of Brachos, and it's come up several times, that generally speaking, what comes first is you take truma, which is an average 2% of the crop, and then from what's left over you take meiser. But in this case, the Levi went ahead and jumped the gun and chapped the rein of his meiser before the Kohen took his truma. Okay, and he took it when it was still in the stalks, before it was chayev in truma. Okay, and we're saying that in that case, meiser rishon sheikdimo b'shibolin, that when the Levi chapsarain from the stalks of grain, when it's still in the stalks, before they threshed it and made it into piles and it was chayev in truma, shmo tovlo the trumas meiser. So then that meiser that he takes is is immediately considered tevel until he separates trumas meiser. He has to separate trumas meiser, which is meaning after the Levi gets his 10%, he then takes 10% of his 10% and gives it to the Kohen. So already from the bundle, so then it's already going to be considered, tevel. So in general, like Abaye says, everyone agrees that or at least the Ikad Amri of Abaye, everyone agrees that that bundles of fenugreek would not be considered tevel, would not be chayev in trumas yet. But when that Beitzah says that these bundles of fenugreek are tevel, it's talking about when a Levi jumps the gun and chapsarain trumas his meiser before while the grain is still in the stalks. So that grain immediately becomes tevel, and he now needs to separate trumas meiser immediately. But now, frakti gemara, kotesh lamali. How come that Beitzah says that he first needs to separate? He first crushes it and separates the seeds, and at that point he takes meiser, or in this case trumas meiser, from the seeds. Lemale, let the Levi say to the Kohen, let him just separate 10% of the stalks without having to go through the headache of crushing them first. Just give 10% of his stalks to the Kohen and say, that just like they gave it to me in the stalks, like this, this is how I'm going to give it to you. Why does he have to go through the bother of crushing the stalks into seeds? Amarava knasa. Rava says it's a knas, that because really there is an order of things, that first we're supposed to separate truma and then meiser afterwards, and he chapped the rein from the meiser before the truma. So therefore, as a fine, we say you have to crush it first, separate the seeds, and only then give the trumas meiser to the kohen. Tanami Hachi, we also learn in a Beitzah like this, that Ben Levi Shanosnu Lo Shibolim B'Maiser, that if they give to a Levi stalks as his Meiser, Osa and Goren, he's gotta like process them in to the point where you would store them away, you would thresh them and pile them and stuff like that. So the Levi would have to do that. He can't just give it over to the Kohen in a stalk. Anovim Osa and Yain, if he got grapes as his Meiser, so he has to make them into wine. Very interesting. Zaysim Osa and Shemen, if he gets olives, he's got to make them into oil. Umafresh Aleim Trumas Meiser, and then he separates Trumas Meiser Venosan the Kohen, and then he gives it to the Kohen. Shekshem Truma Gedola En Niteles Element Agorin Umena Yekev, just like Truma Gedola is specifically taken from the granary, from the point when it's ready for the granary, Umena Yekev, or from the wine press. Kach Trumas Meiser En Niteles Element Agorin Umena Yekev. Also, Trumas Meiser is specifically from the granary and from the wine press. You wouldn't just give stalks of grain to the Kohen as Trumas Meiser. Now, Frekti Gemara, Mechashiv, Hamedida boy. If we look back at this Beitzah that we're saying is talking about Trumas Meiser, and it says what? It says, Misha'ilo chavile tilson shal tevel, arize kodesh umechashiv kamazer yesh boy u'mafresh shal azer v'u'mafresh shal eis. It says he considers, he figures it out in his head. It's not exact. He approximates, he figures out in his head how much is Trumas Meiser, and that he gives to the Kohen. So Mechashiv Amedida boy, what do you mean he just, estimates, evaluates? Doesn't he have to measure it out exactly? Hamani Abba Elazar ben Gimel. This is the opinion of Abba Elazar ben Gimel. He Tanya, as we learn in a Beitzah, Abba Elazar ben Gimel Omer, says Abba Elazar ben Gimel, V'nechshav lachem Trumaschem, that when the pasuk says that it will be considered for you, Trumaschem, your Trumas, plural, Pishtei Trumas HaKosam Medaber. We're talking about two types of Trumas over here. Achas Truma Gedola, ve'achas Trumas Meiser. One being Truma Gedola, and the other being Trumas Meiser that the Levi gives to the Kohen. Kshem Truma Gedola, and he tells us, be'omed uvmachshove, just like Truma Gedola, which is, it's not an exact 2%. It could be 1/50th, it could be 1/40th, 1/60th. It's not an exact amount. It isn't a specific amount as all, if I'm not mistaken. So just like Truma can be taken as an evaluation, uv machshava, and also you could think about it, right? So while you need to separate Truma in order to eat, food is tevel until you separate Trumas, but you can even just intend like, hey, that part of the mixture of the tevel, I'm going to be separating as Truma, and then you can eat the rest of it, and separate the Truma at the end. So kach Trumas Meiser, also Trumas Meiser, nitelas ba'omid uv machshava, can be separated as an evaluation. Or as a thought, you can figure out, okay, I'm going to take that part, you can evaluate. It doesn't have to be an exact measure, according to Abba Elazar ben Gimel. Gufa, we said earlier, Amr Babo, Amr Shimon ben Lakish, Meiser Rishon Shektimo b'Shibolin, that when the Levi Chapsarain, when he takes his Meiser, when the grain is still in stalks, Shmo Tovlo l'Trumas Meiser. So now Memele it becomes Tevel until the Levi separates Trumas Meiser and gives it to the Kohen. My time, how come? Amarava Oviata Olav Shem Meiser. Because once already it has the name of Meiser on it, so now already you have to separate Trumas Meiser. Amr Reb Shimon ben Lakish Meiser Rishon Shektimu b'Shibolin Potter Mitruma Gedola. Says Reb Shimon ben Lakish that when you have Meiser Rishon, that the Levi Chaptarain before the Truma Gedola was separated, right? So the Levi Chaptarain, the Truma, before the Meiser Rishon, before the Truma was separated, given to the Kohen. So the Levi took the Meiser first. So Amr Reb Shimon ben Lakish, where am I? Potter Mitruma Gedola. So he does not need to separate Truma Gedola. Again, b'Shibolin, when it's in the stalks, right? So if the Levi Chaptarain from the stalks, when it was not yet Chayiv and Truma, because it's only going to be Chayiv and Truma once you thresh it and you put it in piles and flatten the tops, at that point it's Chayiv and Truma. When it's still in the stalks, it's not yet Chayiv and Truma. And at that point, the Levi Chapsarain, before it was Chayiv and Truma. So, Patur Truma Gedola, the Levi does not need to separate Truma Gedola, as we already learned way back in Masechta Brachos. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, and we've seen this Gemara. This might be the fourth time we've seen it. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, let's see. If we look at Beitzah, it says we've seen it in Masechta Shabbos, we've seen it in Masechta Eruvin, and we've seen it in Masechta Pesachim already. Now we're seeing it in Masechta Beya. So Meiser Rishon she'ikdimo b'shibolim poter mitruma gedola. So the Levi does not need to separate truma gedola from his meiser that he chapped. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, "Varimosim imenu trumas Hashem," that he will separate from the meiser that he took the truma meiser min meiser. That he takes 10% and gives it to the kohen. Meiser min meiser amarti lecha v'lo truma gedola v'trumas meiser min meiser. That when when it says that the Levi needs to separate Trumas Meiser from his Meiser, so he only separates that 10% the Trumas Meiser and gives it to the Kohen, does not need to separate Truma Gedola from it as well. So now it says Papa Tabai, if that's the case, well then why is this limited to when the Levi chaps arayin from the stalks? Even if in a situation where you already threshed the wheat and put it in piles and smoothed out the top of the piles, now it's mamash chayv and truma. In that case also, if you didn't yet separate truma, and then the Levi goes and chaps arayin is meiser, so in that case also, it should be potter from truma, from separating truma and giving it to the kohen. Because after all, the pasuk says, "Vari most of men in truma Hashem meiser min meiser," only meiser min meiser, not also truma. So Amrle, So Abai responds to Papa Alecha Amar Kra about your argument. The pasuk says, "Mikol ma'aser seichem tarimu eis kol trumas Hashem." That from all of your ma'asers you have to also separate truma, and that is coming to include a situation where a Levi chaps arayin ma'aser before truma was separated when it was already chayev in truma. Umara Isa, how can we apply the pasuk of only ma'aser min ma'aser, not also Truma Gedola and Meiser Min Meiser? So how can we apply that to when the Levi chaps arayin from the stalks, and we apply the obligation to additionally separate Truma Gedola for when it was already in the pile? Hay idgan v'lo idgan. The answer is because once it's in a pile, it's already considered dagan, and once it's dagan, so then what does it say? What was it? Truma v'imosim menu dagancha v'tzarecha. What's the pasuk that talks about? But right, it's only Dagon, Tirosh, and Yitzhar, right? Anyways, so once it's already considered Dagon, so then it's going to be chayiv in truma, and even if the Levi chaps arayin before truma, he's got to separate truma from his meiser in addition to meiser min meiser once it's already Dagon. Tanan Hasam, we learned over there. Where's over there? In Meisris. Okay. Hamikalev Seorin, Mikalev Achas V'ochel. So if a fellow has kernels of barley, he could peel each kernel one at a time and eat them one at a time in a temporary kind of way, and he doesn't have to separate Trumas and Meisris. V'im kolaf v'nosan l'soch yado chayiv. However, if he peels these kernels and then, collects a whole bunch of them in his hand, well then at that point he's already going to have to separate Trumas and Meisis. Rabbi Lazar v'chein the Shabbos, and then Rabbi Lazar adds that the same would apply to Shabbos, meaning that if you peel a barley kernel one at a time, you can eat them on Shabbos. But if you peel them and then collect a whole bunch in your hand, so then it would be a problem. You can't do that on Shabbos. Ini, is that really true? That both Rab and Reb Chia's wives would peel for them cups full of these barley kernels. They would peel the peels from the barley kernels, and they would have cups of them on Shabbos. But didn't we just say that would be a problem? That just like if you peel barley kernels and collect them in your hand, it's going to be chayiv in meiser. You're also going to be chayiv for the malacha of what was it called? Oh gosh, what's the thing I'm thinking of right now? Not dash, but oh gosh, now I'm forgetting which malacha it is. All right. Mefarik, that's what it is. Mefarik is what it is. So what's the deal? So Eli Itmar Aseifa Itmar. So rather it's about the next part, that Amola Mlilis Shel Chitim, that if a fellow rubs together, so he's got stalks of wheat and he rubs them together in order to separate the kernel and eats that. Al yad, he does it, or there's a different case that says miyad, right? Minapeach miyad liyad. So he's able to then, winnow them by just throwing these kernels from one hand to the next and separating the chaff that way. And then he can eat it. But if he winnowed it and then collected them into his thighs, so then chayiv, he's going to be chayiv for Trumas and Maisers at that point. Amr Rabbi Lazar says Rabbi Lazar v'chein l'Shabbos, that also if you did it on Shabbos, you will be chayiv. Okay? Maskifla Rabbi Abba Bar Mamel. But then Rabbi Abba Bar Mamel asked the question, one second. V'reisha l'Maiser in the Shabbos law? Wait, so did we just literally get away with saying that in the first part of that Mishnah, we say that if a person peels a barley kernel one at a time and eats it, that's okay. You won't be chayiv in Trumas and Maisers. But if he collects them in his hands, he's going to be chayiv in Trumas and Maisers. But on Shabbos, he would be potter, as we saw from Rav and Reb Chia, that their wives would fill up cups of them. But how could that be? Do we have any other precedents for things that on Shabbos it would not be considered a malacha, that you'd be able to fill up cups and cups of these things, and yet for Meiser it's going to be considered a completed malacha, and it's going to be chayiv in Meiser? So Maskefla Rav Sheshes Breder Rav Idi Vilo. Rav Sheshes Breder Rav Idi says, what? Do we not have other examples? Vagarnon LeMeiser. But what about with at the point that it's considered, processed to be chayiv in Meiser? Let's see, the Tanan, as we learn in the Mishnah, Ezu Garnon LeMeiser. At what point are the following things chayiv in Meiser? Hakishun vadlu mishei paksu, cucumbers and gourds from when their blossom kind of falls off. V'shelo paksu mishiyamid arema, or if the blossom hasn't yet fallen off, then when you put it in a pile, at that point it will be chayiv in Trumas and Meisers. V'tzna nami gabe bitzolim. And also we learned by Beitzah Mishiyamid Arema, once you put them into a pile. But when it comes to Shabbos, if you put like vegetables in a pile, you're not going to be chayiv like a korban chatos. So what do you have to say? Meleches machshavos also Torah. Hachanami meleches machshavos also Torah. Very, very interesting. So how are you going to have to answer it? You're going to have to say that what's considered osir on Shabbos, meleches machshavos. And it's very interesting. I don't think that we ever saw a definition of meleches machshavos in Masechta Shabbos like we see here, which is very interesting. Apparently, meleches machshavos is like a professional activity. It has to be done with intention, properly. And therefore, putting something in a pile is not really going to be considered something that that you're going to be chayiv for. And you're not going to be chayiv for it on Shabbos. Right, so therefore, when it comes to Meiser and stuff, when you put it in a pile, it's already considered chayiv Meiser. But in order to be chayiv for Shabbos, it has to be a professional job, and putting stuff in a pile or peeling some barley and putting it in a cup isn't considered like a professional job per se, and therefore you're not going to be chayiv for that. Very interesting. It's not going to be considered a malacha. Ketzad molel. So we've been talking about rubbing these kernels of barley and wheat and stuff together. What exactly is this? Abai mishmei Rav Yosef amachada achada. Abai and says in the name of Rav Yosef, if you take the barley kernel and put it before, or the wheat berry, put it in between your two fingers and then rub them. Rav Abi mishmei Rav Yosef amachada atarte. Rav Abi says in the name of Rav Yosef, it's taka one, put it in two fingers on one side and one finger on the other and rub it in that kind of way. Rava Amar Kivim the Mishani afilu chada akulu nami. Rava says, look, once already you're doing it in a different way, by doing it in your hand, you can even use your whole hand, who really cares? How is this winnowing thing? That you can winnow them by putting it in your parts of your fingers, not in your palm, the sort of finger parts of your fingers, and then throwing it from one hand to the other. They laughed at Rabbi Bar Hava in Eretz Yisrael. Once already you're making a shinoi by doing it from one hand to the next one, you can just use your whole hand. It says, Rabbi Lazar, you can just winnow it in one hand with all of your strength, I guess. Alright, sounds good to me. Alright, friends, that was Daf Yud Gimel of Masechta Beitzah. So Daf Yud Gimel kind of talked about, bundles of fenugreek and legumes. At what point do they become chayiv in Trumas Amaisis? We saw that Abaye initially said that when it comes to fenugreek, once it's in a bundle, it's already going to be, everyone agrees that already it's going to be chayiv in Maisis. But then there was another way that Abaye explained that actually everybody agrees that when it's in a bundle, is Dafka not going to be chayiv in Maisris. And when we have a Beitzah that says that a bundle of fenugreek is going to be chayiv is going to be considered tevel, it means if it's trumas meiser, if it's that if a Levi takes bundles of fenugreek, so then he's going to have to separate. It's going to be considered tevel when it's trumas meiser, in order to separate trumas meiser. And we said that when you have stalks of grain, so then when you separate Trumas Meiser, you mamash have to separate them into like seeds, break them up into seeds and only give it to the Kohen in that kind of way. You have to process it properly first. Then we talked about different halachas, some halachas that we've seen before about if the Levi gets to the stalks before and chops his meiser before truma has been separated from it. So if the Levi chops it when it's still in the stalk, so he doesn't have to separate truma, just trumas meiser. But once already it's become grain and put in a pile, so then if he takes the truma, his meiser before the Kohen takes truma, so then he does have to separate truma gedola. Then we got to an interesting sugya there about peeling these barley kernels. That if you peel a barley kernel one at a time and eat it, so then you won't be chayiv in trumas hamaisus. But if you hold a bunch of them in your hand and collect them in your hand, so then you're going to be chayiv in trumas hamaisus. But we say that when it comes to Shabbos, you're not necessarily going to be chayiv for the same thing, as we know that Rav and Reb Chia, their wives would fill up cups of these barley kernels for them, and that was considered acceptable because it wasn't maleches machsheves, because it wasn't done in like a professional manner. It was just like, peel a bunch of barley kernels and put them in a cup. So that's, it's not going to be considered a malacha that you'd be chayiv for on Shabbos, even though they would be chayiv in trumas meisus at that point. Friends, that was Daf Yud Gimel, Masechta Beitzah. I hope you enjoyed. Peace out.